Hello, my name is Margo Morton. Today's date is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019. I'm interviewing Professor Jason Powell on the Ball State campus as part of the Ball State University Honors College Oral History Project. Thank you, Professor Powell, for agreeing to participate in this effort, which we're conducting during the Honors College's 60th anniversary year. I'd like to begin by asking you where and when you were born.
I was born in Seattle, Washington, September 27th, 1967.
And how did you like Seattle?
I miss it every day. So I lived there till I was 18. I went to college in Michigan. But yeah, I love it. Still want to go back someday, so to live full time.
Did you ever think you would end up in the Midwest?
No. No, that's not. In high school, I knew I wanted to go to college in the Midwest, yeah. So, and I think at that point I was just kind of ready to get out of the house, So, I mean, there's a reason why you move out when you're 18, So I wanted to go 2,500 miles away, so. So, mom and dad are great and all, don't get me wrong. But
Speaking of your mom and dad, can you tell me about them and any siblings that you have?
So my parents, let's see, they got married in 1962, still together. So been going to the same church since before I was born. I have a younger sister who's 17 months younger than I am. And she has 4 children. 2 of them are Ethiopian twins, where they flew to Ethiopia to adopt them when they were born. And the other 2 are her and her husband's natural children. So. So my parents have 6 grandchildren, so we're an education family. My dad taught 3rd grade for 30 years. My sister was a teacher until she started having kids, and then my mom has been a swim instructor for 30 years. So,
Can you tell me the names of your parents and sister?
My mom's name is Vaila, V-A-I-L-A. It's a family name. We had a book written about our family back in the 70s. It was made into a cheesy PBS movie too as well. So she's named after one of the people in the book. My dad's name is Ray, and my sister's name is Mikelle, M-I-K-E-L-L-E. So.
And you mentioned it was a teaching family, so did you always know that you were going to end up teaching as well?
No, God, no. I remember sitting, I'm officially an historian, and my junior year in AP history, I remember thinking, why on God's green earth would anyone want to go teach history? This is the worst decision anyone could ever make. I thought it was awful. I hated it.
What did you want to do?
This is getting into the part of my life that I come from a hardcore right-wing fundamentalist background. So I was going to be a minister. That was my goal.
Okay. So we'll get back to that. So you went to King's High School in Seattle.
Yep.
You graduated in 1986. Can you tell me about what type of student you were in high school?
I don't think I would have made it in the honors college. That's, I was about a 3.5 student. I really didn't care. I had a hard time caring about a lot of school, but I didn't really have to study too hard. I think I had a pretty good aptitude for it. But I didn't really care for it. Part of it, I didn't like it. I like sports. I was just really into sports, so and I played all the sports there. So.
What sports did you play?
Football, till I got horrible whiplash and ended up in a neck brace. So yeah, but primarily in track. I was a state javelin thrower, and so got pretty good at that. So, and I did discus and shot as well. So. Yeah.
So now, can you tell me about what did you do after you graduated high school?
I went to my little denominational school called Grace Bible College. About 130 students, but that was, just like someone would go to, their Lutheran school or a Catholic school. I was raised in this really kind of strange little denomination. And that was our school in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So that's where I wanted to go and, sort of continue on. And so I went through there and then got ordained through that denomination. Yeah. And then after that, I went off to seminary and got a master's in theology. and that was when my denomination kicked me out. So, which is a whole story in and of itself. Sorry.
Where did you go for seminary school?
Grand Rapids Theological Seminary.
So can you tell me a little bit more, reflecting on your religious upbringing?
Yeah.
What did you think about it at the time?
What I tell people today is that fundamentalism is not a list of beliefs, it's a worldview. And my worldview was about as small and singular, as all fundamentalism. So there's religious fundamentalism, there's atheistic fundamentalism, there's scientific fundamentalism. Anyone who sees the world through a single lens is a fundamentalist. And then, tries to beat other people into that worldview. And so, so that's, so I was immersed in it, really indoctrinated into it, went off to, Bible college and then seminary. And so, and that worldview didn't really begin to collapse till I was about 30 years old. So, and it hit me hard because I'd been in it so long. I talked to a lot of students, who sort of lose their faith at 16, 17, 18, but because I was 30, it hit me hard.
What year did you get your master's in theology?
94.
Okay. And so in 1989, you got married.
I
to
did.
Christina. So can you tell me how you met?
I was dating her sister at God, and that didn't go well. I'm just a shitty person. I'm sorry. I probably shouldn't say shitty, should I? Yes, I was dating her sister first. So they're only 11 months apart. So my wife's 6 months old, so she graduated a year before me. So she was at the college a year before me. But I came in with her sister, who also went to the college. So we dated for a while, but like a month, and clear it wasn't going to work out. So. So I just thought I'd move up in the family. I don't know. It was weird, and I got made fun of back then, and I still get made fun of today when I say this. Yeah, so, rightfully so. I have it coming.
So then she was also part of that
yes.
religious fundamentalism.
No. She grew up Catholic. But then her dad sort of ripped him out of the Catholic Church and forced her to get baptized at a Baptist church, and she ended up going to Grace Bible College because she was just living there and didn't know. She was involved in the youth group, and some people from the college were there, and so she had nowhere else to go. She just wanted to get out of the house, so it was more of a matter of convenience for her, but she never really bought into the weird theological stuff. Yeah.
So when you all got married, what was kind of your consensus about religion? Like, how are you going to approach it as a couple?
She was more, at that point, she was sort of embracing our form of Protestantism without really, but her heart was never into it, but I didn't know that as much at the time. I was, kind of blinded by my own, we have the truth, and so that was the biggest problem with my denomination. We were very small, and they told us, well, we're small because we have the truth and no one else does. And we were told things, which is it kind of cultic in some senses a little bit. So, and so she just never bought into it, but I bought into it hook, line, and sinker because I was born into that tradition. So, but she was always a little more skeptical and never really sort of always kind of missed her Catholic roots. Yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, the name of the denomination you were
It's called the Grace Gospel Fellowship. Yeah.
So did you ever serve as a priest in any church?
No, it would be a pastor in Protestantism. That's all right. Yeah. No, before, so they did. My denomination kicked me out. I was actually teaching at the Bible college. So they asked me to come and teach. I was teaching classical Greek, and they found out that I disagreed with them on a number of theological issues. So they fired me, said, "You're not welcome here to teach," and they revoked my ordination. So I didn't really have anywhere else to go. I didn't really know what to do. So, and that was in 95. That was in 1995. So I sold computers for a year. And then in 1996, I started teaching high school. And I taught for 3 years.
What did you teach at the high school?
I was the religion and Bible teacher as a private high school.
Oh, okay. Yes. What was the name of the high
Kings
school?
West High School. It was the sister school to the one that I'd gone to. Yeah.
And also around this time is when you had your first child.
1994, okay. Yeah, is when my daughter was born.
And her name is Symphony.
Symphony, yes.
And then you had Soren.
In 1997.
Okay, can you tell me a little bit about each of them?
Yeah, my daughter Symphony she's just a remarkable person. She has a son now, so Jude Michael, born January 10th of 2019. She works at Ruler Food right now. She's kind of trying to figure out her future, so what she wants to do. So, yeah. And my son Soren is a junior here. He's a history major, minoring in poli-sci and German. So, and he's in the honors college as well. So.
And when you and Chris first had your kids, how did you plan on raising them as far as religion goes?
Symphony was born when I was 27. And I was already we were still going to church, but our hearts weren't into it as much. And so for the first couple of years, we were attending different churches, but I just, so we just went to different Protestant churches. We tried out Presbyterian churches and other just, community churches and things like that, but nothing really stuck. And it was the year before Soren was born that I had my first sort of real crisis of faith. I mean, that really hit me hard. So, yeah, right before, I was about 29 and a half, I guess. So I still remember, because it was a book that did it to me. So it was The Flight of Peter Fromm by Martin Gardner. So kind of chewed me up inside. So.
So then you ended up going to get your Bachelor of Arts at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So why did you decide to do that?
We were living in Seattle, and I knew that I no longer wanted to study theology. I just didn't. I was so tired of it. I'd been so sort of beat up by it, I guess. And I wanted to do. So I wanted to study philosophy, and which I'd already started doing some reading on. While I was in Seattle teaching high school. And Calvin College, there's a couple reasons. One, at that time it had the best undergraduate program in philosophy for a liberal arts school in the country. It had a great name. It was back home in Grand Rapids, where my wife was from. And so, but the big thing is to be honest with you, because the Bible college I went to wasn't even accredited, I would have had to start over as a brand new freshman anyway at a state school. So at least as a quote-unquote Christian college, Calvin, it's Dutch Reformed, they at least recognized my bachelor's. So I could come in and just focus on my major, so I ended up double majoring in philosophy and history with a minor in literature. So.
And when you entered Calvin College at that point, did you know you were going to end up wanting to be a professor? That
was the goal. So I was 32 years old. I knew I didn't want to teach high school anymore. And I knew I did not want to teach religion anymore. So we made the decision, 32 years old, 2 kids, and I mean, that was like my 9th midlife crisis, but, I had one, but it was a struggle because that was all, I'd sort of lost my faith, I'd lost my job. I mean, I was just in a relative state of, a lot of anxiety and just angst about my future. So I thought I'll go off to grad school, and get a PhD. I love reading, I love writing. So that was at least the intention. Yeah.
And then so you graduated from there in 2002. Then you went to go to grad school and get your PhD at the Ohio State
Yeah,
University.
the Ohio. That's so stupid. I'm sorry. It's just God.
So what brought you to OSU?
But you know, I got into also to Boston U, which would have been fun to study history, but the funding wasn't very well in Boston. The best apartments we could find, or the cheapest we could find, was $2,000 a month, an hour away from the school. Ohio State at the time was actually the better university. It was a top 25 history program, and rent was $600 a month, and they guaranteed me full 6 years of funding to come in and do the PhD. So they had a strong program, and there was a couple intellectual historians that I really wanted to work with, a couple of them world renowned. So, and had the opportunity to do that. So yeah, Columbus, Ohio wasn't as sexy as Boston in that sense, but it was a all right program. Yeah,
So
it was a great program. Yeah.
And you studied 19th and 20th century American and European intellectual and cultural history.
Isn't that as pompous ass as it goes? Yeah, it's just like, I only say that like once a year, it's so stupid. Yeah, but that's my official yeah. I'm an intellectual historian, so I study the history of art, literature, and philosophy primarily. Mostly in the last few years, more philosophy and literature. But I used to do a lot with art history as well.
How do you think you incorporate that into your teaching today?
It's because I'm a professor of humanities in the Honors College. It's really been the perfect fit. So if I were teaching in a traditional history program, which would be wonderful, I would get to teach my discipline of intellectual history probably once a year, one semester, or maybe even once every 2 years, which is how it a lot works. So because of my discipline teaching humanities, I teach my discipline, intellectual history, every semester. And so I teach art, literature, and philosophy all the time. I do the upper division colloques on, I have, where I do straight philosophy, one course on Nietzsche, another on Kierkegaard. I've done literary colloques, and I still do history colloques. And I do a course on Latin American history. I do one on American social, history. So it really, my concentration or my research interests really align well with what I teach here in the Honors College.
And so kind of transitioning into the Honors College, so you got your PhD in 2008, and then you were hired here right then and there. First you were in the history department, but teaching honors.
Right.
And then in 2013 is when you became a full-time professor of honors humanities.
Right.
So how did you find out about the job at Ball State?
I think it was just, when you're in grad school, you're looking for, all jobs, and you're applying for, they told us to apply to 40 jobs, even if it didn't align. So, but as an intellectual historian, there was probably 19 or 20 that I could apply to. And so I got on-campus interviews at two of them, one at Walsh University in Canton, Ohio, but the other one at Ball State. But the one at Ball State really intrigued me. It was not a tenure line position, but it was a 3-year renewable contract, so with no deadlines or on whether we could renew or not. But the idea of teaching this full spectrum of humanities, and including kind of social sciences, it really seemed fun. So I applied, and then the interview was awful because I was on the phone with like 8 people on the other end, and I made a joke and no one laughed because they couldn't see my face, and I was trying to be sarcastic. So I said, I'm sorry, that was a joke, and it was horrible. And then they all started laughing. So I thought they're never going to call me back. I thought so. Very pleasantly surprised when they did. So.
And then reflecting back on, when you first got this job, and then thinking about your education at OSU, were there any influential professors that you had while you were there at Ohio?
Yeah, my advisor Stephen Kahn was, he was the intellectual and cultural historian there as an Americanist, but he was less sort of intellectual. He didn't do as much in philosophy. He did much more with art and architecture. The European intellectual and cultural historian Stephen Kern was much more, he did more literature, and he did quite a bit of philosophy as well. So that was a big influence. And really his focus was on modernism. Matter of fact, every book he's ever written has just been on modernism. And so that got me interested in that era. But it was a course, my first year, that I took, so we have two minor, my major field was intellectual and cultural history. And then we have two minor fields. So my first minor field was European modernism. My second minor field was American literature. And I worked with Brian McHale, who did his dissertation back in the 70s on John Dos Passos. And so he had me read 5 Dos Passos novels in my first year, and I realized that's who I want to do my dissertation on. So I was so blown away by this 1920s writer. So yeah, so I think those 3 were probably my big influences, yeah.
What do you, did you always have this attraction to like big philosophical thinking and thinking about art?
No, and that's a great question. I literally became interested in intellectual and cultural history because I grew up in such an anti-intellectual environment. So I grew up in an environment where the only thing you should be reading is your Bible. I mean, I really did. And so, my parents encouraged me to read, you know, but I read, I always read a lot, but, you know, I read the Narnia Chronicles and, you know, the Little House on the Prairie series. I mean, as very young, I was reading, you know, as much as I could. And so I was always encouraged to read, but, you know, but my church background was more, you know, you should read your Bible every day and as much as you can. And so, I think that's why, you know, I wanted to do a background in theology. Without really ever loving, you know, the topic. So when I went to back to Calvin, I realized that I really kind of wanted to explore this intellectual world that had sort of been denied, as you know, as well. That's, you know, it was never said overtly, but, you know, it's the devil's work. Sometimes it might have been. And so, yeah, I just wanted to, all of a sudden, all these ideas were just like blowing me away, and I just could not, and I was so far behind. You know, I was 30 years old when I first started really reading on my own, and I hadn't read anything, so I felt like I was 10 years behind everyone else. So I just read and read as much as I could for the next probably 10 years. I just did not stop reading anything I could get my hands on. So I read very broadly. I read literature, philosophy, science, still theology even, you know, but now it was all like the heavy hitters, you know, the Germans and the French, and, you know, so trying to really, you know, broaden my horizons. So I became an intellectual and cultural historian because I came from a very strong tradition of sort of anti-intellectualism, which is a subculture, you know, religious subculture of American history. So I was very fascinated by my own experience and how that fit into the larger context of American literature and ideas. So the movement that I study, the Lost Generation writers in the 1920s, is a countercultural movement. So, did that make any sense? Okay.
So it sounds like, you know, there's a lot of these topics that get you really excited, and I was wondering, how do you get your students excited about these topics?
I don't lie to them. I don't tell them, you're going to use this out in the job market, because that's just bullshit. We all know it, right? And so what I try and convey is that the ideas that we're going to encounter in class I'm just very honest, they've changed my life. They've made me rethink everything. Matter of fact, Dos Passos, the person I research, once said that for every novel you read, you live a different life. So if you read 1,000 novels, you live 1,000 lives. And I've never forgotten that. And so I try and convey this, that literature and philosophy and all these ideas it's an experience all of itself. There's no means to an end here. This is, you know, we always say, well, the humanities, it'll help for critical thinking. It'll help, you know, on the job market. And it's not that it won't help, but it's like, what about just loving ideas for themselves and just as a human being, what's it mean to just flourish and to take an idea and run with it and have it transform how we encounter other people, how we encounter our world, how we encounter ourselves in our relationship with that world. So as you can see, I'm already, like here, I'm lecture mode here, you know. And yeah, so once I really began to fall in love with ideas, I wanted to communicate it, partly because those ideas have influenced me so deeply, both from the religious context out of which I came, as well as trying to understand that context in the larger context of the entire intellectual world. So, which includes, ideas from other cultures, other nations as well. So.
You mentioned how you don't lie to your students, which...
I try, yeah, I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not afraid to lie to them, just not about that.
Well, it made me think of, you're known for being very candid with all of your students. And I was kind of wondering, how did you decide to take that approach with students instead of being a little more like stuffy or stereotypically professional?
I don't know if there's ever a moment. I'm just kind of a screw off. I don't know. Part of it is because I just the truth of it is I'm really shallow at that. I just want to have fun, and so I figure if it's like people say, "Oh, you should teach this," but yeah, no, it's not fun to teach that. It's that's why I'll never teach Homer. I like Homer, but it's not fun to teach. I don't think anyway. Plus students got it in high school or middle school or whenever. But part of it is I really, in by saying that I want to have, in other words, I really teach things that I'm deeply passionate about. And I think all professors do that. But I think for me, it's not just passionate about it, but it's stuff that's, or it's ideas that have really impacted or influenced me as well. And so it's very easy to kind of make that transition and sort of say, this is what has influenced me. This is what has affected me so deeply. It's changed how I see the world. It's changed how I see myself. Come on this journey with me. So, to me, and I guess early on too, I've always seen the students, and this may sound really cheesy, but I've always seen the students as like my colleagues in this, right? We're in this together. Let's grow together. And so I love days when they where I've had days in the classroom where I've had my worldview transformed. This is new. I mean, I learned so much today, and those are really the fun days, so where you're interacting. And when I was in grad school, there were students who were, 24, 25 years old who already saw the student as the enemy. They don't love history as much as I do. Well, it's because you suck, or whatever. But they were just, they literally were condescending to the student. It's like, why? They're 18 years old. Yeah, you're in a core class. They're not going to love history like you do. They probably hate it. So make it fun instead of belittling them, These are also the same people that just wanted to get their PhD so they could be called doctor. They even were very verbal about that. It's like, no, don't. Just go away. So I thought, we're in this together. Let's just have fun learning about ideas, and if you don't like them, I understand totally, So I try and have a blend of idealism and realism,
So now you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could kind of talk about your pedagogy. What do you consider it to be?
It's a line I've used ever since grad school, that even when I taught straight history when I was in grad school, it's like I don't want to just inform. I want to transform. And I know that's like a nice little alliteration, but I kept thinking about that. Yeah, I know that a year, when I have my students a year from now, they're not going to remember anything we talked about with Aristotle and Plato, but they're going to remember, an environment where they could ask questions, and where they could open up and think about things differently, about themselves, about the world. And I guess I'm one of those who believes that all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge, right? All knowledge opens up who we are to the world. And so in doing that, my pedagogy is, how do we create an environment where students and myself can be open to all those ideas, and open then to that all discovery is a discovery of who we are as human beings and how we interact with our world. And so that's kind of that transformative process, because I don't do exams. I'm not going to make you memorize a bunch of stuff. And there's a place for that. It's just it's much more the sense of how do we approach ideas in a meaningful way that makes us different people. You've maybe heard me say it in class even, if you're the same person at the end of 4 years you were at the beginning, get your money back. You didn't get an education. All you got was job training, And is that why we're really here, So yeah, that's my pedagogy is to really, and so so one thing I don't do is I don't come in unbiased. I don't say we're going to look at both sides, It's like, and we will look at both sides, but I try and say, but what do what's wrong here? And it's like, and I want students to explore, and I don't care what ideas I have, whether I think they're right or wrong, but I always want to challenge those. Even if I agree with them, I want to, okay, I get that you believe this, but why? What difference is it making in your life? Are you living according to this principle?
So you say you want students to be transformed, and I was wondering if you have any stories of students who have maybe come up to you and told you that your class did change them in some way.
This is the part I hate because it feels like I'm bragging. In my 11 years, I probably have over 100 emails that say those things. I've gotten it in course evals and in the number of one-on-one conversations of that the things we engaged in and have had those transformational aspects on students. So even now, this just feels weird to say, but I have sometimes as many as 6 to 8 coffee dates in a week with students, and it's a pretty regular thing. And I'll have students share with me various traumas, sometimes assaults, sometimes I've had many students come out to me, and we'll just talk through all the dynamics of that. And so I want to encounter students at the level where they feel open enough to share who they are as human beings with me. So yeah, I've gotten wonderful letters, and sometimes formal letters actually mailed to me, sometimes in emails, of people talking about what the courses have meant or what I've meant to them, and I write back they've done that with me. So I have some students who have their PhDs now who still he and his wife come down and spend a weekend with us once a year. So yeah. So and so those are but like I said, I try not to focus too much on look how neat because I realize how inauthentic I can be also as well. I never feel like I'm living up to my ideals. So when I get those emails, and some of them are very strong about just I'm a whole different person because you're a classroom, I never know what to say because I feel like they're talking about someone else. So it's like, oh, if you only knew what how inauthentic I can be to myself, that I don't even live up to my own ideals. So yeah, I try to, but I just suck at it. So.
And it sounds kind of like, getting these coffee dates with people or having these really close discussions with them kind of sounds like you're going above and beyond what's normally expected of a professor. Yeah, I have a feeling you probably don't think that is an extra burden on you.
No, I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, why, is that part of your job to you?
I never really thought of it as part of my job because like I said, it's not just that the students are my college. A lot of them are just my friends. Because in the classroom, there's some people you'll bond with more than others. I have had some students I've had 5 or 6 times in the classroom, and I don't even know the sound of their voice, but they're so shy. And they're the ones that will often email me. I'll get an email at 2 in the morning. Just want to let you know, I love your class. I know I don't say anything, but that so, but. And so I guess I don't know. It's probably. I think it's just partly kind of my personality. I just like. I like sort of more meaningful, authentic relationship. Not that everyone doesn't, but I'd much rather hang with one person for an evening and talk than 10 people and go out and have fun. I'm very introverted that way anyway. And so, yeah, let's go out and have coffee and talk and laugh and cry and do whatever. But I don't know. I don't want to go bowling,
While you were in grad school or getting your PhD, you did some teaching, and I was kind of wondering now that you've had this experience teaching honors students, like what have you found to be the differences among honors and non-honors?
Well, I've also taught non-honors here in the philosophy department. So I taught for 3 or 4 years in the philosophy department, teaching ethics, intro, and an upper division course in phenomenology. And so I've had a lot of non-honors students, and it's never really been a matter of like intelligence. I've had so many non-honors students that are intelligent. But some of it is honor students, but not to belittle, but honor students are probably the nice way to say it is a little more professional about their academic career sometimes. Like the way I say it is if a non-honor student isn't interested in the topic, he or she may not read, or an honor student, even if they're not, it's like, they'll read because they want to get a good grade on that little quiz or on the assignment or whatever. So I've had non-honor students say, I don't like this. I said, no, why should I? I don't like it, And I've had honor students say that to me as well, don't get me wrong. But there's just a little more of, there's that sense of, they carried this through from high school and they already have that, kind of motivated. And sometimes it's not always the best motivation. Sometimes that performance mode has become their identity, and they're afraid to shut that off. So where that doesn't seem as maybe as intense sometimes with non-honor students. So, but some of them are just as hard on themselves, But I found that maybe that would be kind of one of the bigger differences, just as a collection. Of course, there's always many exceptions to the rule, but yeah, honor students are, to put it sort of more crassly, they're very worried about their grade a lot of times, and you know how that is, So, but it's not a bad thing, to take their work seriously. But sometimes they, like a non-honor student, like I got a C, where a C to an honor student is like, yeah, it's like I might as well just die now. It's over,
Thinking more about the distinctions between honors and non-honors, we read Anthony Edmonds and Bruce Galehood's book, Ball State University and Interpretive History, or Ball State University and Interpretive History.
Right.
And they wrote that there have been faculty members who've noted that it'd be a disadvantage to these high-achieving students to not have an honors program. So when you teach your honors classes, what do you hope you're offering to the students that they wouldn't get in another class?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know if I really thought about it, because when I've taught my non-honors classes in the philosophy department, I try and the same approach. I try and engage on the same levels, and that I do. It's like I always I try and bring my A game, and sort of teach passionately and engage. And so it's. I think what the Honors College really, to me, is that when I taught my non-honors classes, they would always, when I talk about the humanities, it was, well, how come we don't get that? And so it's a 3-semester sequence of art, literature, philosophy. They're like, that sounds so cool. And that's the big thing, I think, that really, so I think the honors students get a little broader perspective, and they get, because they still have to take the history class, they still have to take, but then they get this on top. And so, and I'm a believer. I think that what we do in the Honors College should be taught school-wide. I just think it should be part of the core. So, and I've had non-honor students say it's not, it's not fair, and other honor students will tell me, yeah, my roommate who's not in the Honors College is kind of jealous that I get to do these cool classes. And so I don't think these things should be for like the top students or the elite students. I think these should be universal things. So, like, I don't understand why philosophy isn't taught at the high school level. I don't get it. How to think creatively. It's like, why don't we teach that at the high school level, So, yeah, it's not meant to be an intellectual discipline only for, a select few. It should really be universal things.
And yeah, you're kind of speaking to the next question I wanted to ask you about,
'Cause I
talking
knew
about
that. Yes.
the inequality. Also
Yeah.
in the book that we read, they said some faculty opposed honors when it was first introduced at
Oh,
Ball
I didn't know
State.
that. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
because of a strong egalitarian impulse to not allow an elite group of students to form. So I don't know, just like when you're thinking about that statement, have you encountered other faculty who have ever thought that way?
I think I think that way as well. I mean, let's be blunt, right? College matriculation across the country is 60% women, 40% men. In the honors college, it's about 75-25, and they're predominantly white, middle and upper middle class. And so, I mean, there's a clear lack of diversity. Now that's changing. We have a diversity committee that's really in trying to promote this. We're trying to even reach out to marginalized or disadvantaged communities to look at a much broader spectrum of students. But this has been sort of later in the game. But yeah, this is, there is a sense where yeah, and one thing I liked about teaching non-honor students was I had so much more diversity just as far as cultural backgrounds as intellectual backgrounds. Honors college, there are a lot of hard science majors, which are wonderful, a lot of business majors, but I had such a broader spectrum of even majors and sort of interests in non-honors classes, so in the core at least, yeah. And so, yeah, I think the honors, don't get me wrong, I think the honors college is an incredible thing, but I know students who have said, well, I was going to be an honors, but I didn't want to do the extra work. Of course, I don't think it's extra work. As far as the core, it can be a little, an extra class or two, but, well, they're harder. I don't think they are. And they're just different. And so I know that, yeah, like I said, I really believe the program we're doing here in the honors is really a wonderful program, but I would like to see it university-wide. I just would. I think it'd be wonderful. I don't mean erase, the honors college necessarily. There's still, the other advantage we have is, they're capped at 25 for core, and they're capped at 15 for upper division colloques or electives. And there's something unique about that. And I don't know with the population of Ball State if they could shrink them down that, they just wouldn't be able to do that aspect of it. So there's something unique about the honors college. It's just the way I describe it. It's a small liberal arts school in a larger university. So it's the best of both worlds, So there's wonderful aspects to it. I think we're moving in a positive direction on trying to make it more accessible to a wider group of people that are coming out of high school.
So it sounds like you really understand and acknowledge the lack of diversity that's been found in the honors college. Do you think over the years that your honors students have also understood and acknowledged it?
We talk about it very openly in class, depending on the class topic sometimes. But yeah, the students are well aware, and so and there's many times that I have to challenge the students because they'll talk about gender discrimination or racial discrimination. I said, well, what about economic discrimination? I said, you guys, you're sitting here, and most of you come from kind of well-to-do homes. Not everyone, but do you challenge who you are as a consumer? Do you realize that the reality you live is not the reality for millions of people in this country who are either trapped in generational poverty or who have never had that shot? And are you, you're all up in people's face about these other things, but are you confronting how you engage the world yourself? So we really, how do you, this is one of the biggest questions, is how do you get whoever they are, how do you get students to realize the urgency of something that they themselves don't feel? And this is the big question. How do you get people to be empathetic? When most of us, and it's not that the students are calloused, but it's like, if it's not on my radar, I don't really think about it. How do you get them to not only think about it, but to realize that maybe the way they encounter the world isn't right, or is bigoted in many ways, but bigoted not necessarily, in terms of race or gender, but bigoted in terms of class and sort of well, I've worked my way here. Well, yeah, you were raised in a family that really gave you all those opportunities to do that. So, there's ways to challenge sort of that demographic that's in the honors college to really think beyond their own experience and say, okay, what does it mean to really confront how I live.
So that kind of brings me to talking more specifically about the classes that you've taught over the years. So kind of just like looking through some older materials, I found a few different examples. In 2010, you helped with a class organize this event called Beyond Hunger, the Starving Minds of Central America. And this was to raise awareness about Latin American children dropping out of school to go to work.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit more about how that came to be?
That was the first 189 I ever taught. And they asked me to do it, and I thought, so it has to be on some aspect of global, the non-Western world. And I'd kind of been intrigued by Latin America because during the 19th century, Europe kind of beat up on Asia and Africa, but we're the country. As an American historian, I realized, what we had done the same thing to South America, or to really everything, and the North American countries of Mexico and the Central American countries. And so I really wanted to understand that relationship. So, so for a final project, I didn't even really know what to have them do. And so someone said, why don't we plan an event? And it was a lot of fun. I don't know, how effective it was in the long run. We had about 100 people show up for it. It was, it was fun. We had a student share. We had a little documentary. The students really worked hard and really, were I think, thought it was a beneficial experience. It didn't, I don't have a lasting impact, but I hadn't even thought about that year. I thought about it a year or two, but it was the only year I did it because for one, I didn't know how to grade it, and back then I was worried about putting a grade on everything, and some students didn't do very much work, it's like, that's why I hate group projects, so, but yeah, so it was to try and, the class was so, and I still teach that 189 in Latin America, and the number one response I get is, how come we didn't know about this stuff? The fact that we overthrew Guatemala in 1954, the first democratically elected government, and just a year after overthrowing the president of Iran, their first democratically elected government, so all over oil. And so we were doing, and my students, how come we didn't know this stuff? So that first time I taught it, the students were like, well, we got to tell the world, it's like, yeah, this is kind of common knowledge in these countries, but so they really wanted to do something to kind of disseminate that message, so, yeah.
And then the year after that, you brought students from your 189 class and 199 class to Indianapolis to participate in the Occupy Indianapolis
Oh my gosh,
event.
where are you getting this stuff from?
The Daily News website. I was interested in that. Okay, so that was a protest against the 1% of wealthiest Americans. And I'm just really interested on how you decided to do that.
Yeah, the Occupy movement of 2011, I'll be honest, when it first started up, I thought this is not going to go anywhere because you have no power over these corporations, When people like Martin Luther King and Gandhi were protesting against injustice, they understood that we can't do anything if we don't have economic control of the region. So Gandhi, how many hundreds of millions of native Indians just quit buying British products. Britain didn't leave because they thought, we're morally wrong here. They left because they couldn't afford it anymore. Same with the United States South. They didn't say, we need to be less racist. Martin Luther King made it so economically uncomfortable for them that they just couldn't afford to do this. And then, and it ended up changing legislation. So the Occupy movement was like, we're going to bring down corporate. No, you're not. And I remember watching Fox News during that time, and they were just laughing at them. And I thought, this thing's a joke. But I thought, let's go down. And so my heart wasn't really even into it at the time, but I thought some students wanted to go down. I said, well, let's go down as a group. And so we took a number of them down, and it was a lot of fun. I participated, but I just was still kind of, And of course the thing crumbled just a couple weeks later, you know, so because they just didn't really have the ability to organize to, you know, how do you bring down a $400 billion multinational corporation like Exxon, you know, you're just not going to. By protests, you know, there has to be you know, actual legislation that's going to do that. So yeah, but I think I was sort of testing out my own like experience, like how much of an activist do I want to be, or in other words, do I want to put my energies there, or do I want to put my energies in encouraging students to do that? So, and I think after that, you know, and we'd done some other things, I thought, I don't know if it's effective for me to spend my time, you know, running around doing these things. I'd rather really try and concentrate on helping students to decide whether they want to get engaged at that level. So,
Can you think of any other experiences that you kind of cultivated in your classes that are a little more unique like that over the years?
I don't know. I'm trying to think. No, after 2011, I think I got really dull, you know. No, and I think that's when I really began to, but I think that's when I really began to start teaching about, you know, generational poverty a lot more and social injustice. And so it was still on my radar, but I really wanted to focus on the classroom. Yeah, so I don't know if I've done a whole lot until this semester when we're the Virginia Ball Center. Yeah, has been, of course, the big one. So.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can talk more about that
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So yeah, you're currently teaching a class at the Virginia Ball Center for Creative Inquiry. It's the Beneficence Family Scholars. So can you tell me more about how that project came to be and what you've been doing?
Yeah, it's a fascinating. It's really a fun story. In July, I got a call or an email from Jen Blackmer, the director of the VBC, and one of the fellows, faculty fellows, had to drop out. I think it's because they had two people from English, and I think the chair, Kathy Day, said, I can't lose two faculty in one semester. So all of a sudden there was this hole, and I knew Jen, and I'd always been like that. They've been asking me for years, like, oh, come over to do a VBC, but I didn't know what to do. You know, it's like, because you have to have a product at the end. And I was thinking, well, yeah, I don't know, we're gonna read. You know, it's like I just wasn't very creative. You know, and so, but I thought, okay, I can do this, and I thought I'd do something with generational poverty, but I wasn't sure. And then, so she sent the email, and I went up and right away talked to John Emmert, and he said, you know, because I had to get permission to do that, and he said, yeah. And about 3 days later, Lydia Katowski emailed me, and she goes, and I never even had Lydia in class, so, but she knew that we talked a few times, but she knew that I had done a lot with generational poverty, and she goes, I have an opportunity I want to present to you. So she came up a few days later. It was on a Friday. She drove up from Louisville. And so a 3-hour drive, and she presented what she'd been doing at Family Scholar House, which is like the nonprofit of nonprofits. So when it comes to generational poverty, there's all types of nonprofits that'll focus on food security, child care, healthcare, those type of things, or education. But the Family Scholar House, they like do it all. They hit every aspect of generational poverty. And it turns out they are the only one in the country really doing it like this. There was an article a year ago, last April, in the Washington Post about them, and so now they're getting inundated with calls. And so Lydia said, she goes, I can't believe the work they're doing. It's transformative. And at Family Scholar House, when it started in 1995, it was started by a group of nuns, and then by 2003 they were only working with 4 families, and then they hired their current president, Kathy Dykstra, who's like a force of nature. And now they work with 280 families with like 900 on the wait list. Their graduation rate is up into the 90th percentile above that. And it's just remarkable. And so Lydia came up, presented it, and she goes, I want to do something like this in Muncie. And so I thought, well, maybe we could do this as a VBC. And I said, Lydia, tell you what, you know, write me up a proposal. And I thought, I'll get a proposal in a couple weeks. It'll be a few pages. 3 days later, I had a 16-page proposal, all the names, dates we should contact, the whole list of everything. It was like, I was like, okay, this is too much for me. You know, it was beautiful. And then I went to back to Jen and said, you know, here's my idea. And at the same time, we have to have a community partner. The Excel Center hadn't even started yet. It's an adult high school here in Muncie that started in July. And I walked in and they hadn't even started yet. And they do the same thing we're trying to do at the high school level. So it's an adult full core 40 high school. And the average age of their students are 29. And so they have people who, you know, I wouldn't want to go back to school at 29. I think their oldest person is 67. So, and they have child care, they transport, they do it all, and it's just amazing. And I go in there, and the guy I met, he goes, I was just going to email someone from Ball State, like, how do we, the guy I met just happened to be the college and career person, and his name is Jason, and he's a historian. So I tell this story, and people say, like, people have asked me, like, do you believe in God? And I said, well, if I do, and you guys know it's because they paved in front of Cooper there. That's my theology now. Because that Riverside, you know, remember how horrible that was, Riverside? Yeah. So they paved that, and it's like, if there's a God, it's because of that, not because of this other stuff, you know. But yeah, people, it's like this all fell together within like a week. It was just so weird. And so now here we are. We are building a nonprofit. And we're in our, it's sort of 3 phases. We're doing the pre-residential part, so we're going to get our families up and going, and we have programming, the whole ball of wax. We're seeking donors, and we're having conversations with big donors to get funding, and then we hope to bring in our first students in the fall of 2020. So we have a remarkable board. We have 2 board members that, like, everyone knows in the city, who are very active in the Whiteley community and just and have been working with generational poverty for years, and who understand how to build a nonprofit. I have no idea how to build. I'm the wrong person for the job, but I just have an incredible group. Yeah.
Why did Muncie need something like this?
Muncie is like a lot of post-industrial towns, but almost doubly hit. You know, a lot of towns lost their auto factories. Well, Muncie lost its auto factories in the 70s, but it also lost the ball factories. So after the 70s, the economy really collapsed. So now outside of the hospital and the school, which are the 2 largest employers, the rest of it's a retail economy. So it's minimum wage, and you know, you can't build much of an economy that way, but the poverty rate in Muncie is at 21%, which is above the national average. But even our poverty rates are skewed because they're still from the 1964, I think, is what the numbers they use, and so it's actually much higher than that. But the poverty rate among single parents, which is who we work with, is single parents, to get, you know, to afford, so they can have that education, a chance to get a 4-year degree. The poverty rate among single parents in Muncie is at 40%. So they just really struggle. So, and I should say that's what we're about. Benefits and Family Scholars is to provide all those opportunities so these students can get a 4-year degree. So as much as fully funded as possible. So, but we use all the networks we can and all the government options as well. So.
What will be the end product of just this semester?
This semester we're launching our pre-residential program. So it's getting the foundation set. So we built, like, our potential scholars will come in and they have to go through orientation. They got to start programming. And the programming is things like financial literacy, cooking classes, things like that. But what's unique about what we're doing that's different than Family Scholar House in Louisville is we're also developing humanities programming. So scholars, and the idea is to encourage parents to read to their children. So we have one on civil rights, we have 2 on dance, we have one on the Hunger Games, you know, so just the idea is getting parents to read to their children. So the purpose of Benefits and Family Scholars is for single parents to go to school, and all they have to do is concentrate on their education and their children's education. So we're building scholars from a very young age as well, and so we're building all this programming. So they'll start those things. We'll start getting in the process of housing and developing childcare. And so phase 2 is the residential program, where we actually are able to provide housing for our scholars and their families. And then phase 3 is the post-residential program. So we're still a year away from the residential, but that's what we're trying to set up now. We're trying to look at housing options and that'll start in 2020. And of course, the post-residential will be a few years after that. And so we'll have those liaisons that will help them once they've graduated to find jobs that are meaningful to them. So. Like I said, Family Scholar House in Louisville has 18 full-time staff that are all their program, is just devoted to their students and their children. And then they have over 2,000 volunteers who help in this process. So we're trying to continue to grow that base of people who are interested. So,
how has it been different teaching one 15 credit hour class at BBC compared to a normal class schedule?
I don't like it. I mean, it's been a great experience, but it's like, I got to be honest, I really miss the classroom, and partly because the idea of the VBC is that it's student led, and we have such a dynamic group, Usually these VBCs, like you can have up to 15 students. We have 16 because they gave me an extra one, or let me have an extra one. But sometimes they have trouble meeting the 10 minimum just because it's hard for a student to take a full semester off. So we had 44 applications of this. I didn't even go outside the Honors College because I thought, well, I'll start what I know. And it was just because this project, it really sells itself. It was so amazing. So students were more like, I want to be a part of this. We had like 18 freshmen apply. And at that point, they'd been a student a whopping like 4 weeks at Ball State. So I didn't take any freshmen, but their hearts really wanted to be involved. And so it's not that I haven't enjoyed it, but I've really kind of worked myself out of a job. I'm just kind of supervising because I mean, it's such, of course, Lydia is in it, and she's like a force of nature herself. And I have such talented students that, so I do, but I mean, I do a lot of sort of more behind the scenes work, and but I'm not in there like talking about all the ideas I love. So I miss the classroom, but I will really miss working with this group full time. But I'm ready to get back in the classroom. Yeah, partly I think part of that is just because it's such a wonderful thing we're doing, but I feel so underqualified for it. What's a humanities professor doing starting a nonprofit? Like I was president for like 3 weeks. So, and Lydia, just because I have the letters after my name, right? And Lydia's, after a while, she goes, I was doing some research, and it turns out you don't need the letters to after your name. So do you want to be president? Oh, God, no. She goes, do you want to be vice president? I'll be, oh, please, yes, thank you. So I was president for 3 weeks, and now I'm vice president, which I don't know what that means either, but it's just I'm on the board. And so, but I'm there I want to continue on with this project, but I'm not the right person to lead it. And I realized that. I knew that from the beginning, that there's so many talented people that know what it and goes into running a nonprofit. I don't know those things. So, but I think the two things I can maybe sort of be proud of is I'm very aware of my own limitations, and I think I have a good eye for other people who are much more talented than I am. So yeah, I'll brag about that. Yeah, I know where I suck and where other people don't suck. So.
Thinking about kind of the lessons you've learned, like the two you mentioned, how do you think you'll apply this experience to your further teaching experiences?
I've been thinking a lot about this. Over the years, I felt like such a hypocrite because I talked a lot about generational poverty, but I don't know any poor people. I live in Yorktown. When we moved here, we said, oh, Yorktown's a good school. We didn't know anything, and now, so I live on a little country road, which I hate because I'm a city boy. I like our house, but it just, we're, and I work here at Ball State in the Honors College, so I wasn't in contact, and I'm very much introverted when it comes out into society. I don't go out and meet new people. That's just not, I'd rather stay home and read and, and just be with my family. And so I didn't know how to bridge that gap between my ideals of making a change and not knowing how to do that. So Beneficence Family Scholars, or BFS, is sort of providing that opportunity. I think a lot of the students in the Honors College feel exactly like I do. I think they want to do something, they just don't know how. And it's not that they're, I talked a little earlier, like some of them might be a little indifferent about their sort of economic privilege. And that's not always true. Some of them are, but a lot of them are like, yeah, I realize that and I want to make it, but I don't know what to do. And so we all believe in education. So I'm trying to think about how do I get my classes sort of out there in the community, but now BFS is one of the ways that I can do that. So I'm going to talk about it, every semester, at least once or twice probably, as here's opportunities, you guys want to be involved, and sort of put where your own ideals to life, and move out into that direction. So yeah, so I mean, and because the focus of BFS is education, both for the children and for the single parents, it's something all of our students can connect with. We're all here because we believe in education, even if it's just, well, I'm doing this to get a job, for job training, which is fine. But education really should be about enlarging our worldview and our understanding of how we interact with the world. So, yeah, I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know how it's going to look, because I don't want to beat the drum, like, well, here's the organization I started, now go out and, at all. But I want to encourage them, like, if you don't know what to do and want to do something, we could always use help. We would love your talents.
Something kind of random I picked up on that you were just talking about.
Sorry, I've had a lot of random.
I was kind of wondering how it is to be a self-identified city boy living in Muncie, Indiana.
Yeah, this is the first time I've lived anywhere under 700,000 people. Yeah, so, well, Greater Grand Rapids was 700,000, but we lived right in the, kind of in the mix of it. And I've always lived in big cities, and I or in suburbia. We lived in Columbus. We lived just outside in a little. It was actually a suburb that was closer to the school than other parts of the city. So I've always lived in big cities. My wife is much more small town, Michigan, and so I think that was part of it. Is when I first came to Muncie, I think I had some of this big city elitism, in my mind as well. Muncie doesn't have these things, and it's poor and it's stupid, blah blah blah. And I was, and I realized my attitude was kind of bad sometimes, because I really missed the cities, but I didn't realize it was my own sort of hubris. Well, how do you sort of make fun of or beat up on a town that's really been hit hard economically and culturally? And there's a lot culturally going on, but that over the last 50 years, and so it was probably halfway through my tenure here that I realized, what, I gotta put my money where my mouth is. I can't, I need to get involved in the community, but again, I just didn't know how, so that's how this opportunity has come. So yeah, I don't know, Muncie kind of grows on you. So, I mean, the mall is wonderful, and it's just terrible. But downtown, it's like, but no, there's so much potential, and it's a hurting and struggling city. And so, I realized that if I'm going to be here, then I need to be a part of, a very small part of maybe helping to see it thrive in different ways. So.
You made me think of some of the research we've done in the class. They've always talked about how Ball State has been a little isolated from the rest of Muncie, and I was kind of wondering what you think about that. Do you think your students know about the struggles of Muncie, or do they kind of ignore it or just not know it?
My students now, or my students generally at the Honors College?
In general.
Some, I mean, of course, we have students from Muncie who are well aware, but I think students really, I think to a lot of students in the Honors College, Muncie can kind of be a little bit of a running joke in the sense of there's, sort of brain drain. During the summer, students leave because there's just not the opportunities here. And you just have Indy, an hour away, or Fort Wayne the other way. And so a lot of students realize, I even have students say, well, I'd love to stay here after graduation, but there's nothing for me to do here. There's no job. So it's kind of this place that's sort of lacking in opportunities. And so, and which is one of the reasons why we wanted to create BFS, was to invest in people who already live here and want to make a change here. And so our graduates, hopefully will stay in the community and begin to help the community flourish in different ways. So I think Muncie sort of has this reputation of even students coming in, this is a place where I'm going to come and get educated and then I'm going to leave. And so, how do we begin to change that dynamic? And it is hard because it's, how do you get people to stay when there's not much to stay for, at least not the opportunities that other big cities have, but that's the catch-22. How do you get them to stay to be able to do that when there's nothing to stay for? So we got to start that process and get people committed to staying here and then, and move up. And a lot of people do stay, but it's, I think I heard once Indiana actually has one of the biggest problems of brain drain itself, mostly because it's surrounded by so many big cities. You got Louisville, Cincinnati, Columbus, Ohio even, but of course Chicago, up north. And so we have so many big cities, and Indy, has a lot, but it's so people who live around will tend to leave the state to go get those jobs. And so, Indiana, I think, struggles a little with that maybe as well. And then Muncie is certainly part of that because it's economically it has struggled. Yeah.
And now you're kind of making me think a little bit about the different classes you've had that involve traveling outside of Muncie. So can you tell me about the international traveling that you've done within the Honors College?
Yeah. The first classes I taught that involved a field experience were to New York City. So in 2011 was the first time. It was the first time we'd ever done a course that went to New York. So, and I've done it 4 times. You were on the 4th one with us in 2018. And they were always, wonderful experiences to kind of that, people, they always want to, we got to get out the U.S. to see culture, but there's no city like New York. Of course, there's no city like Paris or Rome either, but there's no city with as much sort of cultural pluralism and dynamism as New York City. I mean, everyone in the world knows it's kind of unique that way. So that was the first thing, and it can be done relatively cheaply as compared to a flight to Europe. So I've done New York City 4 different times, and then I've traveled overseas. The first In 2016, I went with a group that went to Italy, but I was just the faculty travel along. We always need 2 faculty members or 2 professors to go on a trip, and so we were asked to go to Italy with a group, which was a lot of fun. So I didn't teach the class. I didn't have a lot of responsibility there. Just stay at the end, and mostly I just made fun of students, and we laughed a lot. And after the 900th statue, we started becoming our own art critics and just making up stupid stuff to, say why the artist had done it. But it was an incredible trip. But then 8 months later, I taught a class to Ireland that involved a field experience to Ireland. So, and it was fun. It was just it wasn't real deep. It was just Irish culture and history. Dr. Emmert had been teaching it for a number of years, but had always taught it as a 1-credit colloque over spring break. So we taught it as a 3-credit class. And so, and we had a ball. It was really neat. And we went into Northern Ireland. We spent time talking about the Troubles, the Irish sort of Civil War in Northern Ireland, which was really an amazing experience overall. So, and I'll be teaching it again next spring, a year from now. So, but then this semester I was also involved. Obed Frausto, I think, is the first colloque to do a field experience to Mexico. And so they did it on Chiapas, the southernmost state, in the city of San Cristobal, and the Zapatista movement in southern Mexico, which is a movement to sort of an indigenous community with a non-globalized economy. So everything there stays, and it's really a dynamic community. So I was the traveling professor for that. So, and that one was so unique because it was there to sort of study a revolutionary movement rather than, more of a vacation type trip. Although we did other wonderful sort of tourist things as well, but we really got to see how the indigenous Mayan people have worked to have a sustainable community that's really, really neat. So yeah, and I believe that those are foundational. Next year, Obed wants to do another one, but to Cuba. So he will be traveling with us to Ireland, and then Chris and I will travel with him again, he and his wife, to Cuba. So next year will be kind of fun. If the Cuba one goes, there's still a little touch and go on because of politics and things like that. So this is the one thing about the Honors College, as we get to do these types of courses. So I do a course on Nietzsche. I've done a couple times. I do a course on Soren Kierkegaard. if I were in a traditional history department, I'd never get to teach those courses. One of my favorite classes I get to do is Cold War culture through the lens of the Planet of the Apes movies. So there's 9 of them now. But we watch all those, watch document, and it's one of the most fun courses. We do American culture, really in the 60s and 70s through the lens of these movies, and then the current ones. And it's incredible. We read books on racial problems of the 60s, 70s, on the Vietnam War and the whole thing, and other issues of second wave feminism and these topics that are wonderful. So, but I probably wouldn't be able to do that in a traditional history department because they just wouldn't know how we need you to teach these core classes. And we just don't. It's a great idea to do that, but we just don't. Where in the honors college, we are encouraged to be creative like this and have fun with it. So.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you get a lot of flexibility granted to you from those in charge. And so kind of
probably too much.
thinking about those people, like Dean James Rubel, who was dean from 2000 to 2016, yep. And the current dean, John Emmert. Can you kind of tell me a little bit more about your relationships with each of them and how they influenced you as a professor?
Yeah. When I came in 2008, Dr. Rubel was the dean, and Dr. Emmert, it was his first year as associate dean. So we came in together in 2008. So that's all I knew for the next 8 years. And Dr. Rubel's leadership style, Dr. Rubel was just one of the nicest guys. He was just wonderful. But his leadership style was very laid back. So if we presented an idea, he was like, you can make it work, go for it. It was just like real casual. And so as long as we could sort of justify why we thought a course would be, a good, like students were asking, from day one, students asked me to do a Harry Potter colloquium. And I think we're past that time, but yeah, exactly. In 2008, everyone was asking me to do one. It's like, I read it, I liked it, but the student asked me, she'd read the series 7 times already. And it's like, look, if I got to teach something, I got to know at least like 1% more than you do, and that's just never going to happen, But I talked to Rubel about it, I said, what do you, he goes, he goes, I'm not sure. I think the time has sort of passed, And I said, yeah, I think so. And but if we could justify it to him, he was okay. And so he had a little more of a hands-off approach. But he set a culture where that was allowed. Where Dr. Emmert has followed that culture, but he's a little more maybe proactive. Like he'll say, I think we need, so he'll come to us and say, would you be interested in teaching something like this? Where Dr. Rubel was like, he was open to any ideas, but he was much more allowing us to kind of do what we were interested in, where Dr. Emmert will be a little more proactive sometimes, say, well, you know what, I would you be willing to teach a course like this? And so just a different, leadership style a little bit, but both of them are so open to the different ideas we have, and they're fully on board. So, and our new associate dean, of course, Patty Lang was our interim associate dean for 2 years while, after Dr. Rubel had passed away and we were in transition. And, she was wonderful and just open to ideas as well. And now Dr. Livingstone's the exact same way. So, yeah, as long as we can sort of justify why this course will further the mission of sort of exploration of ideas and cultures and these type of things, our leadership is on board. So, yeah.
And then thinking about other honors faculty, I have to ask you about your friend, Professor Timothy Berg.
My buddy.
Can you tell me, kind of just like first meeting him, like how that friendship came to be?
When I first got hired, our offices were over in Burkhart. We're here. I was right down the hall, and we're right next together. And I'm so sorry. That's my daughter. I'm sorry.
I think that adds a good flavor to the interview.
Oh yeah. So we're Tim taught all Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I taught every day. I taught 2 classes Tuesday and Thursday and 2 classes Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we'd run into each other sometimes, but that first year we were also down in, the Honors College was in Carmichael. Yeah, I'm sure you knew all this, yeah, already. Yeah, it was, so my first year, so we were down there. So I didn't see him a whole lot. And then, and matter of fact, our offices were still here for my first, 3 years maybe? I'm trying to think when they told us to get out, or when they had us move over to the, because we started in the Honors College in 2009, and they had a shared office for us over there because, lack of space. So I had one and a half offices at that point. I had my own here and a half one over there. Now I just have half an office, And and I can't remember what year it was. Was it 2012? Had I been here 4 years before they said, look, we need your offices, and now that we have offices. So we went over there, and so the first couple of years, we'd hang out some. We'd go out, out for beers and talk about education. We got to be, we started, getting to be friends. But it was when we moved in together into the same office, and it's still first because at that point I was teaching all Tuesday and Thursday, and he was teaching Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So we still would go weeks without seeing each other. But we'd go out for beers, and we'd just talk about life, and then we started talking about teaching always and we realized we both had very similar philosophies, we had very similar styles, just sort of different personalities in the way matter of fact, the way Tim described it is my favorite metaphor. He said, Jason, he goes, when I talk to my students, I kind of spoon out, what they need, and you're like, bleh. He goes, this is it. He goes, also, I keep my shirt tucked in and yours just hangs out. So he said, shut up. And so, but I would, I would tease him back, usually because he, teaches a class on Eastern thought, and if I'd see him really hot under the collar, I'd say, really, Tim, it's not really Zen of you, is it? And he'd, shut up. I said, oh, I didn't know that Zens could have the vein popping out, so. Or Zen mind, whatever. So I don't know. We started hanging out, and the Fickle Peach was our place, and we'd just go and we'd start talking, and then our conversations would be 3 hours until we're both, too late, and we just, I don't know. Before it didn't take long. I really like this guy, So, and so I don't even really refer to Tim as my colleague. He's just one of my closest friends, and we've shared things about our personal lives, and of course we talk a lot about our professional lives, but it's always because I think Tim's like me, it's like what we do in the classroom is meant to be a part of how we live as human beings. So we both have that similar philosophy, where he's maybe a little more laid back in the approach, than I am, just because of our different personalities, but we both sort of see it the same way of how do we make a difference in students' lives. And I think I can say this honestly, is no one has been more influential in who I am as a teacher than Tim Berg. No one. Just over the conversations of 11 years, I've just learned so much from him. I still have many flaws in my teaching, but if in my moments of good teaching, so much of that is due to my conversations with him, and him modeling just immense creativity, and he's done a lot more of the legwork. He reads on everything from assessment and different techniques and ideas, and so he's always sharing those with me, so I don't have to read them, But I take notes and get to learn about all the wonderful things he tries, and he's so innovative, and he'll be very honest. He goes, oh, this seemed like a good idea in August, and now that it's the end of October, I don't like it so much, So I said, well, then I'm not going to try it, we'd laugh and stuff, but he has always stepped out to try anything he can do to engage students, and so he's so creative. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I've tried some of those. Sometimes they work, sometimes it doesn't. But he's always the first one, sort of on the front line, to try innovative things or to think in creative ways on how to do that. And I just get to sit there and reap the benefits of that in my relationship with him. So he's been good for me, not just professionally but personally as well. So he's just my buddy. So.
In 2018, you taught the New York City class together.
Yep.
How was that experience teaching with him?
It was wonderful teaching with him. I'm not convinced I like the whole setup. You know, it was because of teaching load. You know, we both have to each teach our own classes, and so because it was colloques, we couldn't meet together, you know, more than like half the time. But I mean, I thought it was a wonderful group and a wonderful class, but it was, I don't know, we got to find a way to do that better. But no, I had a ball teaching with him, and we setting up the course was a lot of fun, and then of course you guys were such a wonderful group, you know, to be involved with. But it was, I don't know, it felt a little choppy because we were half the time we were together, half the time we were apart. I don't know if it ever, both of us feel like we didn't hit that cohesion. We thought, you know, we were, and just some of the stuff we were, you know, reading, oh, we probably shouldn't have taught that. Or, you know, we just, you know, or just we're going through and reflect. We both enjoyed it thoroughly, but we want to do it again. It's just, we have to think of a way to streamline it maybe a little bit better. So it was more the logistics, but yeah, no, teaching with him is always fun, you know, so.
And then you mentioned a minute or so ago, you said that you still have flaws in your teaching. So what do you think are some of your flaws in teaching?
I think one of the biggest ones is that I can especially, and maybe other professors experience this as well, I feel like I can get into a rut where I'm asking the same, not the same questions, the same types of questions. And I feel, I need to be more creative, and I need to, and so that's where, you know, Tim helps me out a lot, that he works through that. But I think that's one of the biggest things I feel like sometimes I can get into a rut, and there's other times where I think, so that's the first thing I think I struggle with. I think the other times is sometimes I'm afraid. I love to teach new things, but I'm afraid to step outside of my sort of intellectual base a little bit too much. Like, so this past year I taught my first, in my 201, the first semester with him, my first non-Western, because we're trying to become globalized in our humanities approach. So I taught my first non-Western literature. So I taught Chuang-Tzu, and it was okay, but I was, yeah, you guys had to read that, and when it was okay, but I never felt comfortable with it, you know. So my heart wasn't into it as fully as probably it should have been, because I was, I don't know, I wasn't like, gung ho. So I think I realized kind of how much I like to stay in my comfort zone as well, you know. And here I'm telling students get outside their comfort zone, and yet then I will tend to stay in that myself. So, and it's not that I don't want to, but I didn't feel like I had the time necessarily to do the research to really teach that text as effectively, or, you know, and other texts that I hadn't taught before. Primarily because I don't know those cultures as well. I'm so steeped, you know, with my philosophy background and history background, I'm so steeped in the Western world. And so I'm fascinated by the non-Western world, but I don't have the confidence, you know, and I need to just step up and change that. So yeah, so I think just as far as what happens in the classroom, sometimes I feel like I get into a rut, and then I just tell the students, you know, I feel like I'm in a rut. What should we do different, you know? And so, and yeah, they'll tell me, yeah, stop asking them. Okay, sorry, you know, or whatever. They're not afraid to tell me. So I think those are probably two of the bigger ones. Is I'm afraid to step out of my own comfort zone at times, and then sometimes I really get into a rut, and I feel like I'm just kind of not being very innovative or creative in my approaches. So.
And you mentioned
there's probably a gazillion more that I, you know, just like in the heat of the moment, like, oh yeah, I suck at this too, but.
You mentioned how you're trying to become more globalized within the humanities classes. So like that, and then also kind of talking about diversity. We've talked about a few changes that the honors college could take. Are there any other things you wish you could maybe change about honors at Ball State?
As far as programming goes, you know, of course, the diversity thing is something where, as far as programming goes, I think the one, so matter of fact, it was a year ago that I taught the first thesis class. I taught a class, so I had 12 students in there who were doing their senior thesis with me just full time. That was a course I taught. And it was a great experience, but the thesis is such it's such an odd sort of experience. You know, some students really get into it, other students are terrified of it. We've been doing a better job, but nationwide in honors college, the number one reason why students drop out, they don't get their honors diploma, is the thesis. You know, so that's typically true, and probably even here true at Ball State. And when I took the class, or when I taught the class, probably 8 of the students said, if it wasn't for this class, I would have just dropped out. I wouldn't have done it. And it had nothing to do with me. They didn't, someone had no idea who I was. They just, you know, wanted to, because they said I needed the class to keep me accountable, you know, otherwise I just wouldn't have done it. I said, I totally get that. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm not necessarily in favor of dropping the thesis, but I think we need to have a real discussion of, you know, is there other options? Are there other options that maybe students could do instead of a thesis that will give them a greater benefit? Because some of them, you know, I've had many thesis projects where I've pushed students, you can do a little more, and they just, because their heart was never into it, they're just done, right? So a lot of times I've sort of, accepted theses that maybe weren't there, but I thought, you know, they did it, they're accomplished. I probably could have pushed them a little harder, but, you know, I'm always trying to, so it's like some of them aren't the best quality, others really are, and I wonder if we can increase our options. My other problem is just with I teach online, but I'm not, my running joke is now, you know what the difference between an honors online class and a non-honors online class is? Absolutely nothing. And so that's not, you know, I mean, they're still smaller and things like that, but it's you know, the honors college is all about the discussion, and as we know, discussion boards on online classes are not a real successful experience. No, students don't like them, and they treat them that way. So, matter of fact, that was a conversation Tim and I had at Fickle Beach on Friday night. We had a 3-hour conversation. Of course, it turned into a conversation about life and all this stuff as well. But we're really trying to understand how to, you know, so it's not just a typical online course, you know, so yeah. So I think we still have to have that discussion on, you know, what is the benefit of doing online courses. Now I'm doing my first online course next fall during the semester, so, and it's designed for students like nursing students whose schedule is so awful that they can't, so I'm doing my Planet of the Apes colloque online, so we'll see how it goes.
So on that note, kind of like looking ahead, what are your like academic aspirations for the future?
I never thought I would spend my career here in Muncie, Indiana, but I've been here 11 years. I'm 52. My wife's 52 today. I'm not yet 52. I'm 51. I'm 51 years old, so it's no one's banging down my door to, oh, please come teach at our university right now. And the problem is, now that I'm invested in the Muncie community much more, I see my career ending up here, but it's like, if I ever thought, but if I left Muncie, I'd want to take the honors college with me, just pick up the house and, you know, move it. So I would like to teach at Ball State's honors college in Seattle, Washington, but that's probably not going to happen. So no, I think I'm very content on, if they'll have me, on finishing my career here, and just continue to develop those courses. I'm also working on my own research still, so doing those things. But but I think starting this nonprofit with this wonderful group of students is going to help me invest more into the community and not just here at Ball State. So.
And then another question on a slightly more personal note, I wanted to ask about your son's honors college experience.
Yeah.
Because he is now in the honors college at Ball State.
He is a junior in the honors college, and as far as I know, I mean, I've asked him, I said, you know, you like it in the honors college? And he really has. He's really bonded with OBED. You know, he's doing a fellowship with OBED. He's taken on most of his honors core with OBED. And he went to Mexico, you know, taking OBED's class with us. So, so he's really, it's been wonderful. And of course, OBED is another wonderful friend of mine. And so, I think he's enjoyed it for the very much so. I've always asked him because he lived in Deho for 2 years, and I thought, oh, did you get any flack? And he goes, no, people knew you were my dad. He goes, it was kind of weird, but I developed my own identity. He goes, no one was hard on me or anything like that. I said, yeah. I mean, most people think he looks like me, but I'm way better looking. So that's just yeah. So no, it's right. Yeah, I mean, I try and really. He lived in Deho for the first 2. Now he's back home just for money purposes, but we like him there and he likes us. But we just try and give him all his space and let him do his thing. And so, but yeah, I think he would say that his honors courses have probably been his favorite courses. So yeah.
Did you always know that he would end up in the honors college at Ball State?
No. I mean, for years he wanted to go into the meteorology program here. He was fascinated by weather, And when he was in high school, he took some government and history classes, and he goes, I like science, but I don't have affinity for it. And he really loves history, so history and poli-sci. So that's what he's focusing on here. And I didn't push him to be a historian. So, but he always had the books around, and I had him, reading histories. I said, think about this. I never tried to force him on, but he really loves history. But probably more of that influence came from a high school teacher, history, that he really liked. Because history is what my dad does. But he really kind of fell in love with it. So no, and he's done quite well. So.
Well, on a broader scale, this is a question I have been asked in your class, so I want to ask it to you now. And I want to ask, how do you see the world?
Did I ask that?
Yeah.
Oh, how do you see we did do that. Yeah, that's one of my, we did it in our New York cloak as well, yeah. The way I see the world. I usually start out by answering this question because this is a question I ask in my classes, by talking about how my wife sees the world, because she's an artist. She came back to school when we went here, so she graduated with her Bachelor of Fine Arts in 2015. And she is extremely, what she calls is presently tactile. So she is in touch with her 5 senses like no one I've ever met. So she, I've seen her taste plants. She touches everything. She smells everything. She just, all her senses are engaged, and it's the opposite of me. So I am not in touch with. I am so conceptual. So I am lost in my head almost all the time. And so how I see the world conceptually. And then primarily, the way a lot of it is aesthetically, I'm very influenced by my environment. Like if I can't study in ugly rooms, or things like this. So I'm very, but I'm also a very emotional person. So I think about everything, but everything I think about really affects me deeply. So it's not always a real pleasant experience. But the way I say it, so if there's a tree in a yard, my wife will go up, she'll touch it, she'll feel the leaves, and I look at the tree and think, oh, why is it here? What's the meaning of life? Is there a God? Those are literally the things I think about. So it's just, so we have 2 different ways of seeing the world. So I see the world always as a way of, everything is trying to ask the big questions. What is the nature of being,
Can you tell us your wife's full name and maiden name?
Christina Marie Powell. Christina with a K. Yeah, so that always gets messed up. But her maiden name was Christina Marie Dodd. So, and even though I was very conservative back, when we got married in 1989, I said, do you want to keep your own last name, or do you want to hyphenate Dodd Powell? And she goes, no, no, I'll take yours. I thought, oh, thanks for the vote of confidence. So she, but that is her, yeah. And so we both have degrees from the Bible College in the 80s, and I went back to Calvin to kind of erase that past, and she came back here to Ball State. And because she was not accredited, she had to go she had to take everything here. She'd started all over from the beginning, but she didn't, it was all, she got the tuition benefits and those type of things. So she got to get her degree in fine arts and had a wonderful experience here. So, and she was also in the honors college. So, Yeah, which was really fun. Matter of fact, the first time when she started, and I found out she was going to be in the honors college, I went in and I just said to one of my classes, I just want to let you guys know I'm sleeping with an honors student. And I just left it like that. And so I said, all right, take out your text. And they were like, no. So I thought it would be just more fun to say that without any context whatsoever, so. But it was true.
How do you... So you're talking about how, like, when you first got married and everything, how you were a bit more conservative, and we kind of talked
a
on
bit.
Your religious issues over life. So kind of, what is your relationship now with religion?
So, this is a little bit, it's been a bizarre journey. So, for about 20 years after I sort of left my denomination and left my faith, I called myself an agnostic. But I was much more probably on the atheistic side. But I don't like using the term agnostic because a lot of people, I'm an agnostic means I don't care or same. But it was something, it may be because of my background, but I thought about God every day. That's not an exaggeration. It just never, I was still so steeped in really trying to understand, was there a way to reformulate an understanding of God that was much more not what I had been raised with. And I think part of my interest in teaching Latin America, because I knew one of the big forces in Latin America was liberation theology, basically theology of the poor, Marxist theology. And so the first time I taught my 189, we read the foundational text in liberation theology as a class here, and I didn't believe in, I really did not believe in God at that time. I was, like I said, an agnostic, but I was probably 98%, atheistic, but I was still thinking about these things. So we read the text, and I was so blown away. I thought, oh, this is, a whole new way to envision how God might, be interacting with the world. So. And so I started reading a lot more of liberation theology and liberation philosophy, and this idea of this notion, rather than a sort of this God that is against everything, or this God that is sort of petty and small and just is worried about our sexual sins or whatever, but this God that is trying to understand the full dynamics of what it is to be a human being and full flourishing, and a theology that God is trying to have us encounter and bring justice to any marginalized group, whether it's the poor, whether it's racial oppression or the LGBTQ community. And so, but I still had a very scientific view of the world. We don't need God, but it was horrifying because I really was struggling with, to be honest with you, with nihilism. Like, if there is nothing after, then what's the meaning of any decision I make? And and actually it was the New York trip in 2015. I took a book that I'd read. It was one of Thomas Merton's. He's a great Catholic mystic. And I read that in Washington Square Park in New York City. I'd read it like 15 years before, and I was like, it's all right. And I reread it, and it was the first time in 20 years that I was probably, after I read it, I was at least opened up again to the possibility of God as a that saying that there couldn't be a God was like my being arrogant and hubris, and that I understood reality. And that's what the book says, how can I say I understand how reality is? So it was the first time I was open to the possibility of there being a God. Thomas Merton was a Catholic. I'd been reading Catholic philosophy and theology, so I became a Catholic. So it's matter of fact, 3 years ago now I officially became a Catholic. So, but I still call myself an agnostic. So I'm an agnostic Catholic. So I don't know what that means, but but in the sense of I don't ever say this is what I believe, because I can talk myself out of it. So all I say is I'm open to the possibility, But if there is a God, then it is a God truly of love and beauty and justice, a God that demands that we encounter the world in the full spectrum of trying to bring flourishing and authentic human experience to everyone. So I now started this year, we do a liberation theology reading group for LGBTQ students, and it has really been a remarkable time. So we're reading a feminist liberation theology written in 1993 called She Who Is, and it won about every award out there in that for a book on religion, but it's really a dynamic text. And so we go through it and we chew it apart. I mean, we go line by line through some of the passages, and it's just really amazing. So trying to understand what it, how do we encounter this possibility of this God? So I don't tell them what to believe, or, I don't know what I believe half the time, but so there it is.
Well, and the reading group kind of touches on this, but I was wondering, the topics of spirituality and the meaning of life and all these things come up a lot in humanities, honors courses, and different courses as well. So I was wondering, like, how your religious experiences have affected your teaching of those topics.
Yeah. I try and keep religion out, and politics out of my classes for the, no one wants to hear, but sometimes I'll have a student who knows, like, I go to church, and they'll say, like, yeah, do you go to church? Are you a Catholic? And like, yeah. And then, of course, then they all want to hear the, the story or whatever. I say, well, can we talk about it over coffee? I don't want to talk about it now. So I tend not to, I don't know if we ever talked about it in 199. I mean, it might have. Yeah, it's, I think a lot of it is, how do we call ourselves a Christian nation and just abuse everyone, so that's usually what I'll talk about. But I think it's given me a sense of, if there is a God, and I don't know if there is a God, but if there is a God, and what this God desires is human flourishing and love and justice at that level, and thinking in those terms, how do I communicate that in non-religious terms, So the idea is, how do I infuse all those ideas? So actually, I don't know if you know this, the consumerism class you took was my response to the Trump election. I don't want to talk about him, but I wanted to have a class that was against everything he believes in, right? It really was. That's how it was conceived. I just thought, I don't want to talk about him, I don't want to deal with it, but I want to have a class that addresses this whole sort of American consumerism and just wealth and everything and that whole mindset. So yeah, that was my way of having a political class without it being political. So I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah. So I do the same in my humanities course. When we discuss religious texts, I don't talk about my experience or my, I try not to ever. And we read a lot of texts from atheists who are just, I just, try and let the text speak. And if students ask me, I'll tell them, but I don't,
Well, before we finish up, I wanted to ask if there was anything you wanted to talk about today that we didn't get to.
I think you asked about it every. I can't imagine.
Well,
I should say this is my final note about being a Catholic. I disagree with like 99% of what they believe. I'm sorry, I don't even know why I go, it's like, but I mean, but it really is liberation theology, but all their other like conservative, so I mean, I'm just not there, right? It's like, but they don't know that. I just keep my mouth shut, so, yeah. So when I go to Mass, it's to have my own sort of notion of transcendence, just how do I do this without, yeah. So I would make that qualification, yeah. Because I think true Catholicism is about love, I really do, and justice, and not that other stuff about making all these rules.
Well, I'm glad you got that on the record.
I did. I usually add that, but I thought, oh.
So
I can't believe I got into my own spirituality. Oh shit.
Well, with that, we will bring our interview to an end. On behalf of the Ball State University Honors College Oral History Project, I want to thank you, Jason, for participating in our project.
Thank you.